Good. How are we feeling?
So good.
We'll give everyone a second to funnel in here. Denise Burnside. All right, let's get started. My name is Kate Van Petten, and I work with Sonic Guild in marketing. Today, we're going to be talking about all things music marketing. Thank you so much for being here. But first, I'm going to let our wonderful panelists and guest introduce themselves. So if you could say your name, a little bit about your career, who you are, where you're at right now. Give us a life update.
Okay. My name's Ryker. I own a management company called DIRECTINFLUX. I'm from the east side of the mountains, actually, so it's pretty rare. I'm not a west sider. I'm from Spokane, so representing the SPO, 509. Yeah, anybody from the 9, let's connect after. But yes, I own a management company. Been managing for, a little over half a decade. Broke in a handful of artists, both from the east side. I also work on with artists on the west side. Right now, my current roster is Oblé Reed, which is a hip-hop artist who broke out of the north end. And then I also work with ITM for Teza Talks, who's from Tacoma, or not from, but resides in Tacoma. She's a hardcore pop artist and does a lot of big records. You definitely check her out. I'm also a talent buyer. I own and or co-collaborate on like 3 or 4 music festivals, as well as book for probably the majority of the rest of the music festivals to some degree in the region. I've always been an advocate for independent music and trying to help people understand that the education behind how it all works is going to be the key that's going to allow the music to get to the places that you're looking for. So it's really an honor to be with these guys in Sonic Guild and just how they're packaging this so that it best suits you guys. So happy to be here.
Hard to follow that. My name is McCallum. I work at BARSUK Records. I've been the label manager there for the last 7 or so years. BARSUK's best known as the House of Death Cab Cutie, Fanagram, Surf, Mates Estate. Before then, so I've been there 20 years. Before that, I was briefly at Sub Pop, and I grew up here in the Pacific Northwest, and excited to have a chat with all of you.
Hi, my name's Brittany AMBORN. I just started a new music project. It's called Sister Swimmer, collaborating with my really talented friends, and I feel very fortunate and privileged to be here. I kind of grew up writing music, and it's always been something that I've done in secret. I never really shared with the world. I kind of come from more of a literary background, studying poetry and creative writing, and kind of working with poetry publishing companies and literary journals and copywriting stuff, but the dream for me has always been music. And I think for a really long time it felt really inaccessible to me. It was just maybe like connections, or maybe I was like too new to Seattle, moving here from Arizona. But in the past few years I've been so fortunate to meet the community I have now, which is, I always think of like the phrase, I'm gonna butcher it, but it's like, a rising tide lifts all ships, or whatever that is. And the people that I've met have that mentality and that sort of like warmth in what they create and how they share it and how they teach. So yeah, so I'm here to learn a little bit about music marketing.
And if you didn't already read the brief for what we're going to be talking about, we're going to use Sister Swimmer, Brittany's new project, to build a little case study of our best practices on how to release music. We're going to share a little clip of the song with you in just a second. We're also going to share the campaign plan that we've built for them, some of the tools and resources we've shared with them through a previous conversation with us, and hope that rising tides can lift all the ships in this room through that resource. So the first thing we're going to talk about is building campaigns. It's kind of the foundation of how we approach marketing being the storytelling, right? So y'all, I want to throw out the first question of where do I even start? If I'm an artist trying to release new music, how do I start building these campaigns? Where do we begin?
I always like to start kind of at the end. I think sometimes the issue that I find when I work with young artists or artists that are on their first couple campaigns is that they don't actually know the result they're looking for out of the campaign. And so it can be hard to build the campaign in a way that is going to have the artist feel fulfilled if we don't know the metrics that we're trying to move. Some people are trying to lean their campaign into a tour, or they know they have a tour, maybe it be a regional or a West Coast or a national tour. All of those details would maybe tweak or adjust the type of campaign we would create. If we knew we were doing a national campaign, and this is something we'll probably mention later, we would integrate things that would include national press or national awareness so that we were touching those markets. If we weren't planning on touring at all and we were just looking to create growth in like streaming or awareness to the brand or the artist as a whole, then we might tilt it into something that's a lot more social media driven or direct marketing to the fan and the consumer, and to build a larger fan audience so that then later you can tour. So I think that sometimes we all creatives get in this look around energy after we release, and we're like, oh, well, that person's numbers is this, and that person got that opportunity, and why am I not playing these shows? And I think that you have to figure out what your goal is, and then make sure that you're creating the steps to hit those goals. So at the end of the day, no matter what anybody else is doing, you feel fulfilled on what you did with your project, because this is a very much an individual, it's community, obviously, but like, I think the downfall is when we start to look around and compare. I think comparison can be a huge issue within poisoning the mentality of where an artist could be and where their possibility can go. We were just talking about how Grant had seen a band years and years and years ago with 12 people in the room, and then just saw them right in New York with a sold out, was Madison Square Garden? Was that where it was? Yeah, Madison Square Garden. So it's like that trajectory is large, and no one would know necessarily that we're going here, but if we were always comparing and looking around, and it would definitely deflate the options of going in that direction. So the goal, figure out the goal.
Grant, when you first started working with Death Cab for Cutie, that's the band we're talking about. If you've heard of them, maybe you've heard of them. What were some early goals of theirs? How did they hit them, and how did those goals change as they grew?
When it was funny. So I was working at both at Sub Pop and BARSUK when the Postal Service record came out and Transatlanticism came out, and it's I had this interesting window into this experience, but also I was working in the warehouse, so it's like I wasn't necessarily at those large discussions about strategy. But I do remember when, with the Postal Service record, the thought was like, we're probably going to sell like 5,000 copies of this record. And back then it was like, we're just going to go to indie retail, we're going to do college radio campaign. Obviously there was national press, but sometimes things just catch fire and you have no plan. You have no idea that's going to happen. And that was definitely one of those circumstances. But I would say that in a very similar kind of classic indie rock way or underground rock way, it's like the idea back then was like you tour, you build markets, you do it regionally first, you then extend nationally, which is still a tried and true formula that you can do. The other thing that Ryker said that I really wanted to get at is that you spend months, years making a record, writing it, and a lot of money and time. And then so many times the artist is feeling like they just want to get it out there. They want the world to hear it, which is totally reasonable. But also, it's a very valuable thing that you've created, and so you do have to take the time to think, how am I gonna? The plan that Ryker said. What is the goal? And the feeling is like, I just want to get out there, but first take a step back, think about what your goals are, and then employ this plan so that this thing that you've made that's taken a lot of your heart and your life and your money and your time is gonna have something behind it. So I think that's a really key point. And again, it can be, I'm going on a regional tour, or I'm gonna open a show for this band on this date. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm gonna go tour the whole country, or I'm gonna have, the end goal doesn't have to be like something huge in the beginning. It can be something, but still something strategic, basically.
Yeah, can I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, even just on the records that we just did with Oblé, we changed his name, so we were just like, hey, let's reintroduce you to the Seattle market, your home market. And the first record we put out just broke like 50,000 streams in like a week, and we were like, and so I think that you're right, like you catch fire sometimes and you have to make adjustments to the plan. But if there is no plan in the beginning, then you can't make adjustments to the plan, and now you're on fire and you have absolutely no idea what to do. So just kind of piggybacking, like that definitely still happens nowadays, where you might put something out and you're hoping it touches a few people and it ends up touching a lot of people and people resonate with it. Just trying to make sure that you have the first few steps figured out so that you can expand on those and know what faucets to turn on more and what, maybe to start trickling. And like, most of us don't walk around with $100,000 budget, right? So you got to figure out the flow of like where we're drawing attention and funds to continue on the path.
We're going to be thinking a lot about, I like the metaphor of catching fire, and I'm going to throw another metaphor in there. Before I worked with Sonic Guilds, and many moons ago, I built the strategy for, the marketing strategy for a company called Cut.com. It was a viral video company, so I did a lot of working with virality, how it happens, how to fan the flames of catching fire, and something, a lot of people will ask me, how do I make this go viral? Like, that's the question. Last question was, how do I get these sync deals? Like, how do I make my music catch fire? How do I do that? And I would say that, going viral isn't like winning the lottery. It's like seeing a whale. You have to, there's so many things you can live in the Pacific Northwest. You can live near the water. You could go on a whale watching tour. You can pay someone to show you a whale. There's a ton of different ways to do that. But you do have to try. You have to show up. You have to build a strategy. You have to fail a lot. There's a lot of failure with that. So now we've outlined the first thing you need to do is set up your goal. Is it selling tickets? Is it selling merch? Is it streaming? What is your goal? Outline that goal as first step in building a strong marketing campaign. What's next?
Content is king. We did have this conversation previously, and a part of that was trying to place like who are the most important players on your creative team, and then who are the most important players on your business team. I would say on your creative team, the first 1 and 2 people that make the most sense and you should be like really building relationships with are your producer and or your collaborator and or the people you write songs with, because they're gonna help you find your sound. And nowadays your sound is, always, your sound has always been key. It's what makes you you and what separates you from other sounds and other artists. And so your producer is very important to that. But also your videographer or your creative director is helping you bring the visual aspect of the sound to the people. And in the world of social media and Instagram and TikTok, content is the king of all kings. Like, there are songs that are subpar records that are going crazy because of the content and viral marketing campaigns that people are creating. So I don't love that. It's not my favorite, but it is the world that we live in. So video and who's helping you with your video is a very, very important key, and I would highly recommend you find somebody, even if they're not the most top-notch, and just build with them. Create content that feels authentic to you, that you can do regularly. I think that people always think, back in the day, it was music videos. And I think nowadays music videos still hold a place, but I think that the retention of people are different, the expectation from people are different. And so we've created a lot of like social media type music videos, which means they're smaller budget, a little bit more rip and run, but they still create the same general connection to the audience. And then on top of that, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit later, but you can take a record, film it, 1 or 2 times, 3 times through, and then take it and cut it up into 15, 20, 30 different other videos that then you can just like cycle. So it's not about taking a ton more time and a ton more money. It's about taking what you have and chopping it up and utilizing it differently. I'm a vegan, so this is a terrible reference for me, but it's like utilizing a steak in multiple different ways. Like, yeah, we can just eat it as a T-bone, but we can also cut it up and put it on a salad, or we can take, I haven't eaten steak in 3 years. This is terrible. I have no idea. I'm sure there's multiple ways to eat steak. Right, yeah. I don't know. We can deep fry it.
I'm not a vegan, so
and then on the reference, just so that we touch on it, on the business side, I would say your first 2 most important people are going to be your manager, because your manager helps you pick everybody else within your team. They have a connection to you that is the core. They're the bubble between you and the rest of the world. So a manager is extremely important. But second, which we don't talk a lot about up here in this region, would be your lawyer. because the lawyer is, and some people would argue lawyer goes first. Not only lawyer is going to be able to help you with all the deals and things that come across your table, but also lawyers tend to also work with a lot of other people, that being managers, artists, labels, production houses, and so they have a really unique ability to attach you to other opportunities that they know exist without them even surfacing to like the world yet. They have like a back end insight. So I know a lot of people that use manager or the lawyers as managers as well. That's a way people play too. But we're not getting too much into that.
Grant, can you talk a little bit about how you've seen, even just a few years ago, you'd see marketing is 10, 20% of the budget, maybe 30, and we're seeing that number just grow more and more and more. And it used to be more traditional marketing, right? Billboards, radio, we had PR teams, we did a lot of publicity, we did interviews, and it's shifting towards a lot of direct marketing strategies and a lot of social media, which we'll talk about a lot. Can you talk about how you've seen that shift and where you see it heading?
Yeah, we talked about this earlier when we had our group meeting, and definitely, I think several years ago, people would say, hey, I'm going to put a record out on my own, and people would say, got to get an independent publicist, totally get one. We have labels and just people putting out their own records have drifted away from that a little bit because the power of media has waned increasingly. It used to be like, hey, you get a review on Stereo Gum, you get mentioned in NPR, you can equate those to actual either moments sales-wise, they're marketable moments. That seems to not be true as much anymore. It just is, for whatever reason, it's probably a little bit of the just changing demographics. People who are consuming music, younger people just don't care about traditional media. And so there definitely has been a push for more direct marketing for sure. I would say something that Ryker said, which I totally agree with, is that video content has become increasingly important because of the ability you can use it when you're actually using it for advertisement on social media, the data that you can get from those advertisements. Very, very quick version of it, you make a 30-second advertisement, you spend some money on Facebook, which I would actually really suggest if you're interested in if you're going to spend your own money on marketing your own music directly, you can take these classes through things like Udemy or other online media things are totally worth the $45 you're going to pay. They're going to teach you everything you really need to know if you're going to do pretty small marketing campaigns. And video is important because you say you make a 30-second ad that you're going to send out to people. 10 years ago, you'd be like, oh, my band sounds like these bands, and I'll just write, please target these people. Your ability to do that is very poor compared to the algorithm. And so what you do actually is you say, hey, you can start a campaign that way and say, my band sounds like these bands, I'm going to advertise to these people. And then after you've had one or two campaigns, you can actually say, you know what, who's watched 5 seconds of this video? Who's actually watched 20 seconds of this video? You build a campaign, and then you basically build these like-minded audiences based on those folks. You don't even bother saying what bands are these people. The algorithm will know, unfortunately, the almighty algorithm will know the 10,000 points of connection that those people that watch your video have with 50 other people. So that's why video is so important, is that data that you can actually get from video is extremely important. But yeah, I mean, to go back to it, direct marketing is totally the direction that everybody's going because of the scene is less value when it comes to traditional media outlets.
And what do we mean when we say direct marketing for anyone who doesn't know?
That's a really good question. I mean, that's what we were just describing, but basically the marketing to people directly without having to use intermediaries, basically, and basically going out to audiences directly.
So this can be social media, email,
right.
Text marketing. There's a whole bunch of strategies. So we're outlining that some levers you can pull here are direct marketing, the recommendation from this panel. You can use traditional PR firms. There's a lot you can do. So we outlined how to set our campaign goals, what the levers we can pull are. Now, how do I build a timeline from all of this? It's all overwhelming to think about all of these strategies. How do I have a record, I have the masters back. What do I do? Where do I start?
Still, live music is the way you're going to get the most fans and the best way to do that. So if you're going to be playing, first if you have some touring experience, you're like, oh, I can get on this bill, or I'm going to have this tour, build it around that, basically. And then you can just backwards, run from that date. Tour starts in 3 months, tour starts in 4 months, or I'm going to play a headline showing here, or I'm going to try to play, even if you map out a strategy, let's say you can't get on an opening tour with a band, and you're saying, you know what, I'm going to play a couple shows, I'm going to play 3 or 4 shows over the past 4 months leading up to X show on this date, and try to basically build some sort of momentum going into what you end up seeing as your record release show, or however you want to market that date. I mean, that would be my suggestion. The other thing that we haven't got into that we talked very briefly, which I don't think is super relevant, is like if you're going to make physical product, which is that from the label standpoint, that is the date that basically, that's the thing that sets our street dates. Because vinyl takes 5 to 6 months to make at this point. It's like a record's not going to come out until we have the actual vinyl artwork and master date, which is going to be basically 5 to 6 months from that date. But vinyl is very expensive to make, basically if you're making under 1,000, so most likely if you're starting out, it's very unlikely you're going to be doing that. But if that's something that you're going to do, then that's actually the item that sets your street date, is the physical release.
Ryker, if I want to release this record, what steps do I have to take to get there? Should I release a single? Should I release 2, 3? How far apart do they have to be?
I think it all depends on. I kind of like Grant's answer as far as like the show date. What I typically do is I pick a street date based off of how many records are on the project, right? Let's just say there's 10 records on the project. So in that sense, I'm probably going to want to do at least 2, maybe 3 singles. Nowadays, I've been a big fan of what's called a waterfall release. And so a waterfall is like releasing a record and then re-releasing that record again. So the way that I recently did a campaign was we released a record in January, and then we re-released it in February with another record as a 2-pack. Then we released another single a month, like 3-4 weeks later, and then we re-released that single again in a 2-pack. So each single so far has had 2 releases, right? Single, 2-pack, then a new single, 2-pack, then a new single, then 2-pack. And then we brought all of those records together with like 4 or 5 other records, and then released the project. So when the project came out, it already had like 300,000 streams on it, right? Because of all this music that had been accumulated up until that point. So it's kind of giving yourself a little bit of a running start. It also helps like ping the algorithm multiple times. The almighty algorithm really likes consistency. And so that was a factor there. I typically look at the project and I'm saying, hey, does everybody know that the music industry works in quarters? Does everybody know that? Okay, so for those that maybe don't, there's 4 quarters. January, February, March is first quarter, and then so on and so forth. Every 3 months is a quarter. I find that independent records do best in first and second quarter. I personally avoid fourth quarter. We had this dialogue. I think other people might feel differently, and I think everybody's point is very valid. I just have found in my history, fourth quarter releases are the most expensive. You spend the most money on marketing dollars because the rate for marketing at that time can be the most expensive because you're competing with holidays and a lot of other things going on. Plus, the record industry tends to shut down between like December and 15th and January 15th. And so if you're releasing too late in the year, it's hard to get anybody's attention. It's hard to get playlisting. It's hard to get press because everybody went home or they went to Aspen or like they're just not around. So I usually use the release date of the project, and then what I do is I build the live show about a month after the project. If the artist is brand new, if they're not and they have already had a fan base, then I'll bring that a little bit closer, maybe a week or 2 weeks, just to give time for them to learn the records. And then everything else I build backwards this way. So in the world of Spotify, you need to be uploading to DSPs at least 5, I would prefer 6 weeks, but at least 5 in advance to the actual record being released, because otherwise you're missing like release radar and certain things that the algorithm pings your existing followers and fan base for. So if you're in a 3-week window or less, you're actually not even qualified for any of that, which is why I think a lot of people's records don't do as well as they are hoping, and they don't realize that they're just like right off the jump shooting themselves in the foot from not giving them enough lead time on the algorithm itself. So basically thinking from that context, if the project's here, we're probably going to want that single that comes right before the project within a couple weeks of it, so that it really leans like right into it and just creates momentum. But then everything before that's got to be at least 4-ish weeks apart, maybe more, because you're going to be promoting the record for at least 2 to 3 weeks before it comes out, and then you're going to promote it for at least 2 weeks after it comes out before you want to start promoting something else and shifting attention. So for us, we just sit down, have like a 4-hour meeting, put a big calendar on the wall, start with the release date, and start counting it back. And it will like absolutely show you where everything should land. It's just getting artists to be patient enough to understand that it can't all come out right now, and that we have to build momentum. But the more you build momentum, the more the end result is just kind of pizzazz.
Go ahead.
Can I just say one thing about waterfalling? The idea basically is, let's say you have, in your case, 5-song, 4-song? 4-song EP. Let's say Brittany's gonna release all of them really up to street date. So you're saying, let's say December, no, we won't use fourth quarter. We might be getting a little late. Let's say we're gonna go next year. Let's just say next year for the moment. Say March 31st is gonna be the street date for the release date for the EP. You would just say, okay, we're gonna you are gonna pitch a single to Spotify on street date, which is we also talked about this. There's a debate about whether you lead with your strongest song or you save it for the end. We can talk about that, maybe not. But you would just say, okay, that's the last single is going to be the street date for the EP. You're going to back up 4 weeks from that street date and say this is when the single happened, the single prior, and then you go back up for all 4 singles. When single 2 comes out, you would have both single for track 1 would be single number 2, and track 2 would be single number 1, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. The reason to do that is both from the standpoint of like maybe you don't really play listing on the first track, but you do on the second track, and then people are going to hear them both of them. The other reasoning is people are just going to keep listening, and they're not going to necessarily always skip to the next song. You're just going to get more people listening to your songs. Mm-hmm. And then the third single would be the same thing, or would it be the single number 3 would be obviously track 1, and then single number 2 would be track 2, and single number 3 would be track 1. That's right. I got my math right. Mm-hmm. So that's just like that. That's the concept behind waterfalling, is like just continually trying to get people to hear whenever they enter the process, they're going to hear everything from the album that's come out to date.
We got a question back here.
With the waterfall method, does the metadata and streams transfer with the Twitter?
Yeah.
Do you upload that?
No, so everything in Spotify, here's the other thing. Everybody know what ISRC is, right? Okay, if you don't, come talk to me afterwards. You should always make sure that a song, a master, has one ISRC, and you never change that. Mm-hmm. And play counts are tracked by ISRC. So it's not by UPC, which is the container for the whole record. It's by ISRC, which is the unique identifier for each song. So yeah, that will totally track for sure. And then even if you, we often, just for cleanliness sake, because it's, to me, it bothers my internal record store nerdness, we'll clear all the singles out after street date, because I hate it looking at the discography. So if somebody playlisted one of in their own personal playlist, or even this algorithm, or Spotify, excuse me, it's by ISRC. So even if they programmed it from single number 2, and then you delete single number 2 because the album's out, it will still stay there because the ISRC is the same, basically. Yeah.
Great question. All right, what is a pre-save, and why should I care about it?
Pre-save is the ability to tell people before a single is out to save the track or the whole record. You can do it attached to the record or a single and say, hey, pre-save this record, so that on street date it gets served to you by different ATSPs serve it to you in different methods. But it's basically, encouraging people from whenever you get their attention to pre-save the record, so they don't have to think about it. They don't have to have any more marketing moments that push them to the record. It's like it just shows up in their Spotify on street date, and then you've got them. Once you have them pre-saved, then you got them, which is great.
And how do I get people to pre-save? Can you share any strategies for increasing those numbers?
Oh my gosh, Grant has this amazing thing he's going to tell you about.
It's called Tebow. No.
There's a program that recently surfaced. It's called Laylo. I got to hear about it when I was in LA, and it's drastically changed how we move. So Laylo is a really, really cool, Laylo, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. What's so cool about Laylo is that it creates a really easy transition to bring fans into your audience, right? How we were talking about building audiences earlier. So back in the day, especially for the indie rock guys, they used to do this thing where they would write emails down. And I love that. I think that's so innovative,
Very
you know?
Very quaint.
And emails are still really, really important because back when we were talking about ads, you can take all those emails and build them into the back of your ad campaign, and then it will directly reach those individuals. So it still has a point. But with Laylo, it's like the advanced modern version of that. So it attaches through Instagram, so it feels very like casual to the user that's clicking through, but it will create an invitation. And on your end as an artist, you get to select a phone number. Your phone number is actually going to be a Seattle-based number or wherever you're based at, so it doesn't feel like it's like some random number at all. It feels very authentic. And it's your way to directly message, communicate, and talk to all the fans that are within that Laylo community. But what's cooler about it than that is that it uses Instagram's interface, so it makes it feel very seamless, but you also can set it up where people automatically pre-save not only just the record that you might be talking about right then and there, but every future record to date. So everything past that, they will automatically, if they click the checkbox, they will automatically pre-save it. So if you get 10,000, 15,000 people on your Laylo, you automatically are going to have 10,000, 15,000 pre-saves on every record as you continue on, as long as you don't change your artist name or band or anything like that. The other thing that's really valuable about it is it's mostly designed for tour. So right now we're going on a show run, and we're able to talk to our Phoenix fans and just our Phoenix fans. Like we can be like, hey, we're going to be here at this time and da-da-da-da, and sell tickets directly to our Phoenix fans, or be able to do that just to our Denver fans, or be able to do that just to people in New York. So it allows you to have individual conversations. It allows you to have conversations based off location. It allows you to have a general conversation to all your fan base. So it's kind of like a mailing list, but it's more of a text message based thing that is integrated with Instagram to feel very seamless. And if anybody has questions, I can answer them later.
This is not sponsored by Laylo, but it might as well be. Laylo, if you're listening, we want you to sponsor us. We love you.
Yeah. We're trying to be friends.
And there are lots of other tools that do very similar things. There's MailChimp for your email. There's also Klaviyo is another really popular one. If you don't have a mailing list and you're an independent artist, start it right away. That's the single most powerful piece of information you can get from anyone, anywhere, at any show. Put it on your merch table, shout it out on the microphone, like be shameless, it's so important. It can be phone numbers, it can be email, whatever your marketing style is. There's no wrong way, but collect their information, connect with people.
Side note, we've actually been able to leverage our Laylo as a negotiating tactic for more money for shows. Because people always like talent buyers. I'm a talent buyer. So the number one thing I'm looking at is, do you have draw in this market? That's it. If you don't have draw, you're not really, there's no value for me. So I'm able to say, oh, well, we have X amount of Laylo followers within this area, and we're going to be able to directly communicate with them and invite them to the show. That indicator for talent buyers sometimes can move the needle enough where they're like, oh, awesome, you're worth this, or we're able to renegotiate that because I feel like you have a direct audience that's going to come, to the event, where streaming numbers, Instagram numbers, those things, they're not as good at indicators. Like you can inflate them, you can make them look good, you can, elevate them, but to a talent buyer, it's unless you have previous market numbers, as in like the last time you played at this show or this market, you know what venue you played at, you know what the capacity was of that venue, and you know how many tickets you sold. That's the data I'm looking for. You should also be keeping that in a spreadsheet somewhere, by the way, everybody who plays live shows, because that matters to talent buyers. But Laylo is a way that you can integrate elevating your negotiation skills as well.
And we have a special treat for you today, because if you're wondering, man, what's Laylo? How do I do this? I really want to see it in action. We've actually started a Laylo account for Brittany as part of this case study. And if you go to her Instagram right now, it's at Brittany Page. You can do it after, you can do it right now. Feel free to pull out your phone. In the link in her bio, there's a Laylo there. All you got to do is put your phone number in and you'll get the first message. And then when the record does drop, you'll be the first to know. You can see how we're using that tool, see it in action. There's a whole lot of other artists using it too. I just got one from, does anyone know Medium Build? Have you heard of Medium Build? just released a song yesterday that went like mega viral on TikTok. But I got I was like, oh my gosh, it's in the same thread. This is Lalo. So that was really exciting. Anything else on the power of direct marketing, getting people's information? We talked about email, text. Do you have anything, Grant, that you wanted to?
No, I think that.
Okay, all right. We're going to move on to, within that, another lever you pull, and video. Why is video so important right now? What is the renaissance of video in social platforms right now, and how do I utilize it?
That somebody who can do visuals for you is a really important part of your campaign. In a similar way that we kind of briefly talked about, if you can make one music video if you want to, and whoever you're working with, you can say like, hey, I just need extra B-roll footage when this is done. It doesn't have to be really well, I just need as much footage as you have from what we did, please give it to me. And then you can just make multiple clips out of that. It doesn't have to be, again, like a full music video. It can just be like, oh, I'm gonna click, make 12 of these that I can use on the campaign. You can also just, do obviously live video shoots. You can, any moments that you can just basically work with somebody who has video experience. It's super valuable for just social posting in general, and then also the marketing, the advertisement stuff I talked about earlier. So that's the reason why we have increasingly found it to be the single most valuable tool beyond the music that we get for every release.
Yeah, I would agree. One thing that we do is we shoot the video or the song all the way through a couple of different times, and then we shoot the hook or whatever the catch is of the record, and we shoot that in like, I don't know, 5, 10 different angles, different looks. I mean, same outfit, same location, but just a different angle, different look, different style. And then we cut all of those separately, so we end up with like 15 of them, let's just say, and we start to leak them on the front end of our campaign. And by the time the record comes out, we've noticed that people already know the song, or they know the hook, or they're singing it, or they're humming it. And so that creates like that early connection, because they're seeing it over and over and over again, but they're not seeing it in the same video. Like TikTok and Instagram and Reels and thumbing through socials has ruined us as attention span goes, right? Like, it started with commercials back in the day, and you remember, like, you see it once, and you're like, oh, that was funny, and then you'd see it the second time, and you're like, oh, yeah. And by the third time, you're, like, going and getting a snack. You didn't watch the commercial again because you've already seen it. So then they started doing this thing where they would show you the end of a commercial, but they wouldn't show you the beginning. So I pay a lot of attention to commercials. I don't know if anybody else does, but okay, cool. I'm not crazy. So they'll show you the end, and then the next time they'll show you the beginning, and then they'll show you later, like a couple weeks later, and they'll attach them so you're paying more attention. And then later they started showing you the beginning, but not the end. Like, they started doing these things because the attention span of the individual had changed. Well, nowadays, it's even worse. Like, people's attention spans are like 2 seconds, 3 seconds long. So if I see a video and I'm like, oh, I've already seen this, scroll immediately. So you have to create like this energy of which I'm seeing something new. You're tricking me to think I'm seeing something new, but in all reality, I'm seeing the same thing and hearing the exact same thing multiple times over and over and over again. And it doesn't take a lot more money or time. It's just about how you cut the content. So
a great example of that too is the artist I mentioned before, Medium Build. If you go to TikTok and scroll through their videos, you'll see it's the same song. It's called 'Cause of You. You'll see it over and over again, and you see the lyrics right there on the screen. And there's a lot of repetition is very powerful in marketing. But we've made a recommendation for Brittany along this line. The song that you heard earlier, do you remember the repeated line, "Nothing lights me on fire anymore"? Did that stick out to anyone? Yeah, so that's a line that gets repeated in the song, and we've recommended that if Brittany were to shoot a bunch of videos, that you do something like that. So pick a bunch of locations, do it in one day, find your team, have fun with it, make sure it's visually all within the same vein, so it's still, you're building that brand. But just in that little 10, 20-second hook of the song, using that, creating those videos and posting them on Instagram Reels, TikTok. Ryker, do you have any thoughts on how often do I post to TikTok versus Instagram? Should I do Instagram first and Instagram Reels and then TikTok, or how should I disperse that content?
Yeah, I do think all social medias are different, and I do think the demographics of social medias are different. I think you should look at those types of things when you're speaking to the audience of that platform. Realizing that the audience for Facebook is so much older than the audience for TikTok, right? And the audience for Instagram is like somewhere in the middle. We use Instagram as like a resume. right? So if you're like trying to buy the artist, you're gonna probably scroll through Instagram to kind of see what they're about. So we don't trial run content as much on Instagram, but we do on TikTok all the time. Because TikTok's algorithm does not care. You can like flood that thing and that's just the way it works. So we call it throwaway content, where we'll just like take a bunch of different clips that like we talked about, the raws or something that we're like unsure about, and we'll just float it on TikTok and see how audiences respond. And then when the ones that we feel like respond really well, or we feel like would translate to Instagram really well, those are the ones that we kind of move over to the Instagram platform. I would say that nowadays most people are kind of on an auto post to Facebook from Instagram. I don't think people really care about Facebook, other than the back end of event building on Facebook still is king. Like the ability to run ads through Facebook events and building audiences, which creates like-minded audiences so that you can then re-market to them later, that is still like, you can't beat that. To me, honestly, I think it's less about making more content and about cutting the content you have differently. Because actually, to be honest, I'm trying to make less content, but make the content we have stretch farther, right? Canva would have been my recommendation for that. I do think they do have a great template. But I also think, this is hard because there's a room full of creatives, but sometimes people aren't buying the music, they're buying you. And I think that that's sometimes a separator that people don't always like to look at, is that the music is a catalyst for sure, but a lot of people, they like the band, or they like the aesthetic, or they like the personality. Like, I literally just got this random job like opportunity because of this crazy video of me and my team going through Wyoming, and we were at a gas station one night at like 3 a.m, and we were all doing push-ups, and like that's what stuck for him. He was like, yo, I have to have you on this project because that was so authentic and it was so funny. And I went back to my team and I was like, thanks y'all, you just made me so much money. Like, but it wasn't the music, it wasn't any of the fancy stuff we did. It was the like very raw, authentic moment. So I think sometimes people forget like your favorite, probably not the right crowd, but your favorite athlete, like you might love the way that they play the game, but you also might more love their personality and how they play the game, right? There's so many musicians. The music is less of a separator than I think people realize. It's about you. So I don't think your TikTok or your Instagram or those networks have to feel so like production heavy. Like, we have a unique opportunity in our team where I actually have one of the best videographers in my team. I can cut anything I want anytime. We actually scaled back. I've made him use an iPhone instead of his $3,000 camera, because I'm like, hey, where we're at and where our audience is at, they want to feel like they can relate. They want authenticity. They want connection. So we're gone to a tiny cam that you could have picked up at a Goodwill and create like raw content that feels like it's from like the 90s or something. And it really resonates so much better because that's what the user doesn't want to feel marketed anymore. The age group that's now here, they've been marketed at since they came out the womb. They don't really like that feeling anymore. They want to feel like they're getting to know somebody, or they feel like they found a niche within something that they relate to, and that's what's going to hook them. So I would just think about it from that perspective. I always sit with my artists and try to figure out, like, what are you into? Like, authentically, like, naturally. I don't want this to feel forced, because in 3 months, you are not going to want to do any of this, right? So some like Teza. Teza Talks is her name. Loves to talk activism, loves to talk progressive culture, loves to talk about what has happened in history in the past, loves to talk about what's going on in the future, loves to talk about tech, loves to talk about music, loves to talk. So a podcast was like, made the most sense, right? Oblé used to be a cross-country runner. He loves to run. I don't know why, but he just loves it so much. And so for him, like, we've over the year been, and I'm telling you a secret so nobody tell anybody else out in the room, we're building into a run club. Like, that's where we're headed. And so that was funny. And so, like, we started it by simply just creating videos of him running in different cities that we'd go to. That was it. And now Brooks is giving us shoes, and we've created brand collaborations, and we're, like, trying to integrate it with a tour that we're doing, and it's built us into, like, possibly having a run club, which then turns into more merch that we can sell. And so it's like, but none of it was out of the blue. It was just him. So it's like, what are you into? Do you like to cook? Guess what? So many other people also like to cook. Or like most of the artists I know, they're more than one medium. Maybe they make clothes or jewelry, or they also paint or do other things. I would be a little bit careful with how you mix mediums, because you want people to like know you for the medium you're selling. But there is so many connection points of who you are as an individual that is going to connect to other people that also are into those types of things. So what we do is like big audiences, right? Like, let's just use cars, right? Some people are truck people, some people are SUV people, some people are sports car people. Guess what? You're not getting all three. So which one are you? And then let's go like hit that funnel and bring those people into your funnel. And the more like, we have a saying that audiences are either bought or borrowed. That's it. There's only two ways. You either buy it or you borrow it. So you're either connecting yourself with like-minded audiences and you're borrowing them through collaboration and connection, or you paid for it and you're doing marketing, and that's the game. One or the other.
So we have definitely bands where the actual video itself may not even have the band in it, or if it does, it's very brief slice of it. It's not like like the chorus is being sung by the artist, and you're just like, oh, here's the shot we would use. If there's something visually that's interesting in that video, we've used that multiple times to basically be like, hey, the audio itself and the visual hook may not be the artist, but it's still a visual hook, basically. And so you can also do it in that way, which is, I think there is an importance in some sounds to the kind of the mystery of the artist still, maybe even increasingly so, because it's more rare. So I do think there are ways to do it. It is more difficult. There is a demand to have a more intimate relationship with people than there used to be, but there is ways to do it for sure.
I want to use this to segue to talking about like pros and cons of having an artist name or being in a band versus using your personal name. Great example on the stage here. When we were talking to Brittany, you weren't sure yet if you were going to go by your name or a band name, and there's so many people behind your band. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision, how you made that decision, and your response to the question that was just asked and how you're feeling about it?
Ooh, this is fun. Okay. I think something that maybe like initially kept me from music was the overexposure of it. I knew that it was like, oh wow, like I really have to do the work to show up in a way that is so honest and shareable, and that felt really terrifying. So I think there were a few different reasons why I didn't want to use my name. One is my name's Brittany. It was the most popular name of 1988. Thanks, Mom. Like, everybody knows a Brittany. I also like don't have a ton of attachment to my name. Like, I have 3 different last names from different places. Like, it is just like nothing feels super grounded for me there. I also think something that's really like enticing to me is like not necessarily putting on a persona, but there's this like very captivating freedom with anonymity that can kind of give you, I think, at least gives me like, I have this now like this wide swath where there's more opportunity to write a new story or to really dig into my story in new ways. Also, I think thinking about like even just like a poetic device, like thinking about like naming a poem or naming a book or naming a collection, like I love the character devices of that and the imagery of that. And if I can create a room or a container that is of my own volition, not the name I was given, that feels really exciting. Yeah.
Can you guys talk a little bit about brand building and the importance of a name in marketing? I
am a huge proponent of naming your project something that's not your name. I think it's very difficult. There's everybody knows a million singer-songwriters, and for better or for worse, that can be somewhat of a stigma sometimes in certain groups, and sometimes not. There's something, I agree, that's like an allure about a name of a project. So I'm a big proponent of, obviously there are very many notable instances you could be like, but Grant. But I really feel like there is something about naming your project that does get you over that initial hurdle of just being like, it's my name and it's my band. So I'm a big proponent of it. So when she was when we were talking about it on an earlier call, I was saying yes, name it a band.
And a question I hear all the time from up-and-coming bands is, should I just use my personal social? Should I just transfer those to be the band's social media? Because I have followers on my personal account. Shouldn't that just be my social media? Has anyone ran into that problem before? I see a few nods. Yeah. So what are our best practices for that? As Brittany is creating this project, should they make a new page? Should they keep the old one? How do you build something from zero?
Yeah, I would start over and build something new. And the reason why is the algorithm is already trained on your previous page to be something. So transitioning it, you're going to end up fighting the algorithm the entire time for a new audience. I also think that everybody who's on your friends page isn't subjective to like necessarily wanting to support your music. I know that sucks, but like maybe they're like, yeah, that's cool, but like they're not really trying to like be diehard. And I think that trying to like capture an audience of people that chose to be here because they want to be here and they want this content, they want to get to know you as an artist or a band, is extremely important. Plus, there's an ecosystem. So, I really liked what you said about the music video and having a band like be kind of secondary or thirdary in that. A lot of the times what we have to deal with, I work in, like I said, pop and hip hop, so, and R&B a little bit, but a lot of that is like recognition. Like hip hop especially is very like, it's about me and like, money and marketing and loud. And so we don't get to do that as much. And I think that like the consistency of being able to identify that is who that is, whatever band or artist. And so keeping that consistency across all your social medias, having a similar profile photo across all your social medias, it'll help me follow you on Instagram. And then maybe I'm like thumbing through TikTok and I'm like, oh, hey, that guy, or vice versa. So I think that creating an ecosystem, being able to attach all of them, you should have them in like your bio in Spotify. You should have them, connected. So I shouldn't be able to go anywhere and not go somewhere else. So like I think what a lot of people do is like they'll create a music link for their profile LinkedIn or their Instagram profile link. They'll put their music right there. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But if I click on that music, am I stuck? Or can I get from your website to wherever that goes, right? And then can I get to your live shows? Can I get to your Instagram? Like, if I go down this link, is it a dead end? Or is it going to keep me in the ecosystem of you? So trying to make sure that no matter what link I touch, I can just keep going and find your live shows, and I can find your website, and I can find your merch, and it keeps me like within that as a whole. So definitely create an ecosystem.
Grant, do you have any best practices for creating that ecosystem and connecting them all?
Linktree is extremely valuable, of course, if you don't know of it. I would say that we talked about this earlier. As much as it seems like an old school thing, I think definitely having your own website is important because it's an entity that you own. It doesn't have to be super full of stuff. It can just be actually literally links to your other socials and whatnot. But you should have a website because things change and new things happen and new platforms exist. And so it's important to have that be kind of a clearinghouse for every place that people can find you, for sure.
Great. Well, we've only got 20 more minutes left, so I want to open it up to questions. But was there anything we didn't cover first that y'all wanted to bring up?
Playlisting.
Playlisting. All right, let's do a quick, give our thoughts on playlisting, and then we'll open it up to questions.
I don't think it moves the needle anymore as much as it used to. Not a huge fan. It costs way too much money. There's a lot of better ways. That's my point.
Mic drop.
Yeah, I'm not going to... The bane of every label's existence is bands being in a band together and looking at their peers and being like, how come they have 200,000 more listeners than we do? And then complaining to the label. And it's very easy to be like, well, they're on this one playlist, or this one song is on this playlist. And when that song gets dropped off, this playlist, coffee out, whatever it is, the spike in listeners is just going to drop right off the road because it's great. Don't get me wrong, it's wonderful to be on those playlists, but they don't necessarily create fans. I totally agree with that idea. Like playlisting does not create fans at a very great rate because there are so many basically non-active listeners when it comes to playlisting. They're like, it's cool, they like this playlist, but they're not necessarily actively like, they don't want to go and discover more about those bands.
Yeah, actually, if you go on the back of Spotify now, they break down your active listeners to your passive listeners. You're able to see that, and I think that's really important because I think a lot of people were like, we have numbers, we have listeners, but it's like the retention of those listeners is got to be less than 10%.
Right.
Like, it's so small. So it's like he's saying, a lot of people spend a lot of time and money and energy trying to get playlists, and especially the big ones, the editorials. Labels paid for Spotify to exist. They were early investors. A part of that investment deal was that they got slots on these playlists, these editorial playlists. So back in the day in radio, we used to call it payola, and nowadays it's the same thing, but it's somehow not getting checked really anymore. And so those spots that you're looking for, there's only 2 or 3 on a 30-song playlist that's editorial, that's going to go to anything independent, and it's going to go to the independent record that is virally hitting 1 million streams right now. And that's what it's going to go to. It's not going to go to an independent artist that's just trying to catch editorial. Also, though, if you are pitching to editorial on the back end, which I know Spotify gives you that option, they actually want to see, like, how people would listen to the song. Like, that's how they want you to talk about it. Like, where would I be listening to this song? What is the relationship I would have with this song? And exactly what playlist you think the song should go on. So if you haven't found any success through the editorial portal, it might be because of how you're pitching the record. And so I would, like, go back in the future and, like, make sure you're putting a list of 5 playlists you specifically think it should go on. And then also, like, this is a song for, like, driving when you're this and this and this. Like, they really want that type of narrative with it.
And Ryker, I want you to quickly touch on, you were giving Brittany some advice on, when you're releasing independently, who do you choose to release with? What platform? I think that would be really valuable for this room.
So the distributor that you use. So up until, like, last year, I was always, like, a DistroKid, that, like, world, TuneCore, etc. And then I started spending a little bit of time in LA, and it made me realize that there are so many distribution companies, like, so many, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Did not realize that. Second, I found that when I picked a distribution company that was a little bit smaller and less like Walmart and a little bit more like boutique, I was able to actually meet with the team and the staff. So now when we go to LA, we get to sit with our distro, and they every time we have a new record, they send us it's like a booklet, pamphlet kind of thing that we fill out that then helps them best pitch playlisting and editorial and things upon the DSPs, because they have a different connection with the DSPs, right? But TuneCore and DistroKid are not fighting for your records. They don't know you like that. But I'm able to sit with our distro, explain the record. My artist is with me. We get to play them records that haven't even come out yet, new records that get them excited about it. And then they're thinking, oh, man, we could get you this feature. We have this relationship over here. Like, they're just a little bit more invested into the music. So when the music comes out, at least I feel like we've had a little bit more of a positive result, just because the team feels a little bit more dedicated all the way through to the DSP. So I would just take your time to research your favorite musicians that are like your sound or in your style. Our team always does a top 25 list, 5 majors, 10 mid-majors, and 10 locals that are either like creating content in the way and the direction that you would like, that are touching audiences that you're interested, or are sonically within your sphere. So it's like a guide, right? You're able to look at all those artists and see who wrote about them in the last 2 years, and then reach out to every single one of those, like, publicists, right, or journalists. So now you have a list of journalists to reach out to, or you're able to see the playlist that they're on. So now you have a list of playlists that you'd connect to. So we always use this, like, 25 list as a guide, but it helps you also pick your distro, because you're able to see who's signed to who and who's working with what. And distros are very, like, from my experience, are very, like, a little bit genre focused. So it's all about relationships. Like, this industry, top to bottom, the number one thing, it's about who you know.
People.
Period. This is a people's game. It's all about who you know. So if my distro is aligned with the same sonics that I am producing, and their relationships are all within that field, then the record is going to have a better chance of being heard by the people that need to hear it. So I just think a proper distro, or a distro that's a little bit more invested in you as an artist, could help also bring you to another level.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to open it up to questions. And I want to encourage any underrepresented voices in here, people who don't usually ask questions. If you feel nervous to speak up, we hold space for you. All right, we got our first one over here.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts about or recommendations for submitting to radio stations and how that fits into the marketing timeline, mainly for like non-commercial college radio stations, and any advice you have for like an independent artist who might not be on the radar, how to get on the radar of.
Assuming this is like the beginning of your project, it's always regionally based. Like if anybody tries to tell you like, oh, you should totally hire college radio, no, don't do it. College radio is actually, honestly, in my opinion, like one of the, from indie rock land, one of the best, actually, just like direct marketing things that you can do for actually a pretty good bang for your buck. You're reaching out to people in these markets who are the biggest music fans at their station, and you're actually just marketing to them directly that your band exists. So it's still super valuable, but if you're just beginning, my gut sense is just reach out to regional folks, and then there are obviously everybody knows Audio Oasis on KXP. If you're in that, so there are local shows that's who you should be reaching out to first if this is the beginning of your project. Once you get to touring, then it's and you're playing multiple markets, you can do the same thing in those markets too, and usually do that around touring dates. Like if you're going to play Portland, I'm sure that local shows there. If there's going to be bands you're playing with, they're playing there. So that's my kind of radio 101.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, I haven't had much radio success. I feel like radio's a very expensive game, and unless you're doing something that's going to make it make sense, it's not my favorite route. I do love college radio. I also agree that college kids are like just they're prime. They're just ready to like hear anything and be into anything and go to anything. And so, but the way that we do it is, so we're on a show run here in October. So I basically reached out to all the college radios of all the markets that we're going to hit on the show run, and just sent them a very basic email that was like, hey, this is who we are. This is who's wrote about us in the past. This is, where our music's kind of at. You're in one of our top markets. We're coming through at this time. We'd love to connect or set up an interview. And it's been interesting. I think that a lot of promotion, not necessarily radio, but adjacent things like podcasts and interviews there are a lot of pay to play out there. And so we're just not going to do that, right? We're on the road. It's already expensive enough. So we found some things that have really filtered in that are good, but then some things that are just it doesn't make sense. So I would agree, pair it with being on the road.
And definitely from a standpoint, there's tons of college radio stations all over every state, and just reach out to them. I mean, those are the music fans in each of those towns, and they often. I mean, I worked at Cugs in Bellingham. That's my first place in, and it was I just wanted to hear every band I could hear in my life, and I didn't care. That was exciting when I got an email. So that's my good sense.
All right, over here.
I had success overseas before COVID, and lots of momentum there. But a lot of my friends, Ethan from Massey Ferguson, he's always hitting Spain. I know people that have had little success locally, and personally, when I went to Jamaica or I went to England or France, people cared locally a lot more. So what's your relationship with trying to get these things off in Europe? Because really, if we have success in Europe, it actually helps my hometown shows a lot. So what are the companies you would hire or work with as far as getting a record out and making sure things pop in Europe at some level?
I think it depends on the genre of music. I think it depends on if we're talking Europe or Asia or even Africa or Latin America. It depends on what markets we're trying to hit. I do think that there is a lot to be said about trying to, if you're not feeling like you're getting the leverage that you're looking for at home, to go overseas. I've seen that work for a lot of people. But again, I think it also depends on what the goal is, right? So I tend to work with artists that are very we want to go Billboard top 10. We really want to go all the way to the top and do this at a really, really, really large level. There are also artists that are hey, I just want to tour at 200 cap rooms my whole life and kind of have a career and go home and make food for my kids. And so there's a range of what people want, and I think that those types of decisions can factor into that result, because going overseas, you might create a huge overseas fan base, and that's what it is. So you're able to just every year keep going overseas, go on an entire Europe tour, Asia tour, and then come back, and it might create bubbles over here, but it might not also transfer. So I've seen people do it here and transfer it there. I've seen people do it there, have a hard time transferring back, and I've seen people do it there and transfer it back. I think it depends on the genre and the result you're looking for, just from my experience.
BARSUK has always posited ourselves as an America's-facing record label, partially because the history of indie rock is littered with record labels that lost a ton of money in Europe. And so we actually encourage artists to get deals directly in those territories because for one thing, they can get other advances from other record labels, and then they have local people on the ground who are marketing their records. So I don't have a Europe answer for you. So
Tips for finding a manager?
I would say that you should be picky. And I also feel like for a lot of bands, there's a point, it will become obvious when you need a manager. And generally they should come to you because they are excited about your project. Now, you can invite people out to your show, right? And you can encourage them, folks that you know, but it's usually a pretty organic process. I've seen it when it's worked best. There are totally bands that we also have had who have what we basically refer to as friendagers, which is basically when bands, they need somebody just to literally help with the logistics of stuff. Those are fine to have. They're totally helpful for certain creative projects where bands are just having a hard time like really getting themselves organized. But a manager is a very intimate relationship and also a very important one. And I honestly feel like from a label standpoint, the wrong manager can be more harmful than helpful. So I think it's really important to be pretty strategic about it. Finding, like I said, I think generally the ones that work best is actually they find you. If from being picky, like if you feel like any manager that you want to work with, you should be able to say, hey, can I talk to other people you've worked with in the past? People they both are working with right now and people they stop working with. Because a decent manager will have bands that stop working with them, and they should be okay with you talking to those people. Because if they aren't, that's a potential red flag. Now, there may be circumstances that they won't explain to you that relationships can end messily, but if they are like, I don't want you to talk to people I used to work, if it's a blanket, don't talk to anybody who I used to work with, I don't anymore, then that would be a red flag. If it's like, this one band didn't go very well, but here's these other people, then that's just a little tip.
Yeah, I would also say be hella picky. I'd also say don't be afraid to shoot for the stars. I think that I mostly hand selected everybody that I work with because it's correct. Like, mostly a manager's gonna find you. I think there are a couple factors to what managers are looking for. I can speak only to like what I'm personally looking for. I'm not always really looking for the numbers, right? I'm not looking for this, like, do you have hundreds of thousands of followers? Like, it's not that for me. It's where is your mentality at? It's like one of the first things that I'm looking for. Can we grow together? What is your level of consistency? And I usually take 6 to 9 months before I sign anybody. And the reason why is because in the first, 3 months, I'm getting their best face. In the next 3 months, I'm getting them, just holding on, trying to, keep it together. And in that last 3 months, I'm actually going to see who they are. And I've found, because I work in hip-hop, I tend to lean towards working with men that have great relationships with their moms. Because if they don't, and it tends to, because I'm female, our relationship tends to rub sometimes because I have a bit of a alpha energy about me. So sometimes that doesn't go over well when I work with men, so I have to actually be really selective as well. I found that I've put myself in not great situations by not being selective. So I think both sides have to be very selective and take the proper amount of time to find each other. I also would agree with what Grant said. I'm going to say it maybe more in not the nicest way, but I think most bands don't have anything to manage, right? They want somebody to manage the things they don't want to do or that feel outside of the creative sphere. What I would say is don't shy away from those types of things because you're only going to be better for having the network yourself. You're only going to be better for knowing who these people are and what their roles are. You're only going to be better by reading those books and making sure you're as equipped as possible because if you get a manager and you don't know that knowledge, then you don't know if your manager is doing you right because you don't actually know what's going on. So the way I explain it to people is like, it's like if we were playing basketball, but you didn't know the rules of the game, you didn't know what this ref was here and there, what they're doing, and so you just got the ball and you're just like running around, but they're calling travels and this is happening and that's happening and you're not understanding why. I think there is an element of responsibility upon all creatives that the way my mentor taught it to me was like this. There's a line in the sand right here. And on this side, you can be as creative as you want and make anything you want and just be a hobbyist and not care. But the minute you cross the line and you say you want to sell it and you want to make money from it, there becomes a responsibility that comes with that. You can't just show up to shows drunk. You can't not know your lyrics. You can't be messy. Like, people are paying their own money to participate, support, or listen to you as an artist. And so I think that in that responsibility piece, not only does it come with how you show up, but it also comes with the knowledge that you know and who you know and what you're willing to put into it. I also would say that, unfortunately, our region has very few managers. And that is a part of what makes it all hard, right? And so what I've tried to do is build more managers, right? I always take an intern every single year, take them for the whole year, and then put them back out into the world as a manager. And so I might have some suggestions that I could like lean you into. I also think friendagers go a long way, and creating like a band email that says manager and then communicating with talent buyers from that email, whether that be a manager or not, because as terrible as this is, a talent buyer is probably going to buy you at a higher level when a manager's having conversation than when you're having conversation. As much as that's stupid and it sucks, it's the truth, because there's a feeling of professionalism and like, I know all of these details are going to be handled and squared away and they're going to be done properly. And when we're with an artist, most talent buyers have just had a long enough experience to know that that doesn't always go so well. And so you can kind of position your band to have a manager without having a manager yet, and that might help you get a couple more steps out, and then you can start to like really source yourself somebody that might make sense for you. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. That's all we have time for, but we could all talk about this forever. Thank you so much. Can I get a round of applause for Ryker, Grant, and Brittany?